This is Leadership Series 2006, and this year we're calling it the Campus-Wide Leadership Series. I am Bob Klein, Associate Dean for Professional Development and Faculty Affairs in the School of Medicine. And what I always forget, and so Marty's sitting here to remind me, is these evaluation forms, which we find very important, particularly the part that says, please provide comments on the workshop and what you'd like to see in the future, because we'd like to mold this leadership series to what you'd like to see. This is a program that we ran last year, and we have 4 individuals, and just are going to pick their brains for 5 to 7 minutes. They're going to provide the essence of what they see as team building in different ways that they do it, in different roles in the institution. And then it's going to be open for questions and comments, which in the past attendees have said is the best part of the program. So you've heard enough from me. My job now, oh, I left something else out. Okay. We have a problem with handouts, so if you didn't get a handout.
4 different handouts. We'll have the stacks out on the table outside when you leave, because I think some of you got maybe multiples of the same one, but you need 4, 1 for each speaker.
We'll get it straightened out by the time you leave. So, okay. And if you don't get it, email me, rklein@kumc.edu, and we'll send you the electronic version. So we can always cover you that way. So our first speaker is Dr. John Ferraro from Hearing and Speech in the School of Allied Health. Dr. Ferraro.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. If not, we have some folks in our department who can help you with your hearing loss. I'd be happy to set up an appointment for you before we leave today. I've chaired the Hearing and Speech Department for about 22 years now. And when I was hired into that position, I had really very little administrative experience. And so I walked away from the interviews, and then when I got the job going, wow, I kind of felt like the dog that caught the car. What do I do with it now? And the bits of advice and quote-unquote pearls of wisdom I'm about to share with you, I guarantee you have been acquired via trial and error over about the last 20-some-odd years. The things that I say you should do and you shouldn't do, I probably didn't do and did do over some period of time and have learned from my ways. As I'm looking around the room here and giving a talk on leadership and team building and administration, I see my dean is in the audience, so I've got to be really cautious about certain aspects. I'm just kidding, of course, because she actually is a role model for many of the good things that that I'm going to tell you today. I'm okay with that. Thank you. Well, right off, one of the first couple of lessons I learned that you've got some important jobs as a team leader. One of them is that you lead the parade. I'm the one knocking on doors, I'm making phone calls for faculty, I'm doing the schmoozing at the parties, what have you, that sort of thing. And I'm happy to do it. That's a role you should relish, and it's a role you should accept. You're the one who sometimes is the initial contact for your team, for your program, or what have you. But you have to recognize that as soon as the parade is over, you've got to get behind it with a shovel and clean up the mess that the parade makes. And inevitably, there will always be some. There's always somebody, someone, perhaps you, who's made a mistake along the way that takes smoothing over. Whether it's another call, no, he really didn't mean to say that. Here's what we're really going to do, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very important responsibility for the team. There's 2 roles. You're not only there for the good stuff and leading the parade and taking the charge, but you're there to clean things up afterwards. And trust me, that will happen. The other thing that I found out is that you know you're in trouble when no one likes you and everyone likes you. If your goal in life is to be everybody's friend, don't volunteer or accept a position as an administrator or a team leader. You're going to be asked to make decisions. Decision means somebody wants something, somebody else wants something else. And maybe like or dislike is not the right term. Respect is one of those things that you strive for, but not necessarily is it your role to be everybody's friend. One of my favorite lines, some of you might remember the old baseball manager Casey Stengel, who managed the Yankees and was very famous for the young people are going who. But Casey Stengel was one of my favorite baseball characters. And they asked him, what's the secret to being a good manager? And he said, I keep the 5 guys who hate me away from the 5 who are undecided. And sometimes that's what you're faced with doing. bear with my corniness to a certain degree here. Some of you have this book. My daughter gave this to me for a Christmas present several years ago. And when she did, I thought it was a nice, cute, high school-y sort of thing to do. And then I started to read through it. And actually, there was some pretty good advice in this book that I have taken the liberty to a certain degree of paraphrasing with my own thoughts about team building that I'd like to share with you. First of all, Brown says, choose your life's mate carefully. From this one decision will come 90% of all your happiness or misery. I say, choose your team members carefully. From that decision comes a lot of happiness and or misery. Bottom line, be very discriminating when it's time to hire people or bring people into the team. Do background checks. Talk to other people about them. When I first came here, I thought, I don't care what kind of personality this person has. She's really productive and she's going to get grants and blah, blah, blah. And boy, I paid for that for a long time by hiring. Like, you have to take into account everything, including personality, ability to get along with other folks, etc. Sometimes you don't find that all in one package, and so you have to make certain compromises. But don't underestimate people skills and things of that nature when you're choosing these folks. When starting out, don't worry about not having enough money. Limited funds are a blessing, not a curse. Nothing encourages creative thinking in quite the same way. Looks to me like Brown has the makings of a legislator in Kansas. And if that truly is the case, we in academia are very blessed people for the most part. Money isn't everything, but I would argue that if you're in charge of putting a team together that has a specific function, there should be a budget that's at least sufficient in your perspective to get most of that work done. If you're charged with doing something and you don't have enough money, it's going to make it tougher to do. So that's a negotiation up front, so to speak, whether it's salaries, equipment, lab space, etc., that hopefully will be taken care of for you, but you should pay close attention to it. Give yourself an hour to cool off responding to someone who has provoked you. If it's really important, give yourself overnight. Someone who's Italian, this was really, really hard. Especially if someone provokes you in public. It's a very difficult thing not to react quickly back. In fact, for me, it was very hard not to calm down before calling Uncle Guido for help. But you really have to refrain from being, you're not just another member, quote unquote, now you're the leader. You have to set an example of, quote unquote, acting cool under stress. And stress sometimes means you're going to be provoked, and that will be inevitable. Resist telling people how something should be done. Instead, tell them what needs to be done. Let them surprise you with their creative solutions. And this is true. Nobody likes a micromanager. And if you're a team leader, you shouldn't have the time to be one. I've had micromanagers as superiors. It's no fun. It really isn't. And it's terrible to have to live under that kind of a situation. On the other hand, as a team leader, you should be too busy doing your thing to get involved with the affairs of other folks. Let the folks, again, tell them what you need done. Don't necessarily tell them how to do it. Let them do that. I've told my faculty, some of who are here, this is probably the only one where I really couldn't apply it very much. Yeah. Hire people smarter than you are and let them do their thing. That's crucial. Refrain from envy. It's the source of much unhappiness. And I've seen this happen too many times. As the team leader, you should never be threatened or envious of the accomplishments of your team members. Some of you might say, well, how could that ever happen? Believe me, it can happen sometimes. You need to take great pride in the achievements of your team and let your pride show. Recognize that when your team and your team member does good or do good, it makes you look even better. And it also makes your team look better, and it's made the institution look better. Learn to recognize the inconsequential, then ignore it. Recognize, and again, over 20-some years, don't sweat the small stuff. And you know what? As I look back retrospectively, most of the stuff was small. It usually is. Some big things, but you have to choose your battles carefully. Praise in public, criticize in private. I can't top that one. That's extremely important. And again, it's hard to criticize. It's hard to do this if you've been attacked in public. The best thing you could do is not respond to any sort of provocation of that nature. You will look the better for it. And then you call the person in the room, and then again, you calm down a little bit before you get really mad. But that's the time to do it, is behind closed doors, not in front of God and the world. Learn to show cheerfulness even when you don't feel like it. You know, if you're not having a good time, at least look like you are. Smile, put on a happy face. If you are a glass half empty person, then administration or team leading is probably not what you should be doing. I find it extremely important to be optimistic and to show that optimism to your team. A defeatist attitude is catchy, and it's not a good thing for team building. Never overestimate your power to change others. And basically what that says is if you've inherited someone, because we assume you wouldn't hire someone like this, with a history of being unproductive, don't waste your time trying to make them productive. Reminds me of one of my favorite lines from the old TV series MASH, when the guy they called Ferret Face was bemoaning to Trapper or Hawkeye, "Why do people take an instant dislike to me?" And Trapper said, "It saves time." Look at me, I knew you for 2 weeks before I hated your guts. And I wasted 2 weeks of time. You know, I hate to be a downer about this, but if you've inherited, quote unquote, what sometimes is referred to as deadwood, don't waste your time trying to make them productive. When I first came into my program, I had a couple of faculty members who had taken 10 years early retirement. You know, they came in late, but they made up for it by leaving early, and that sort of stuff. I said, you know what, I can motivate these people, I can turn them around. Well, guess what? It took me 1 or 2 years before I recognized you better find something else that allows them to contribute, because they're not going to be productive. Once they've kicked into that, spend your time being more productive someplace else. And it really is a true fact I've learned over 20 some odd years. Okay. Don't believe people when they ask you to be honest. Don't expect them to be totally honest with you. It's the nature of administration. Get your priorities straight. No one ever said on his deathbed, gee, if I only spent more time at the office. You need 2 lives, folks. Make sure one of them's outside of this place. Okay. As a team leader, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, I made a mistake, I need help, I'm sorry, and no. Okay. Don't major in minor things. Don't major and don't minor in major things. Again, choose your battles carefully. Learn to listen. Remember the words of my favorite philosopher, Yogi Berra, who says also, you see a lot by watching. Leave everything better than you found it. If you can't, just get the hell out, really. And finally, the best words of advice I can impart to you is like what you do. If you don't, find something else to do, seriously, for your own benefit as well as that of your team. I think one of the best experiences I had to prepare me for chairing a program, seriously, and I encourage you to do this when you get a chance, go out there and be a little league coach. Okay? You're dealing with kids and parents, and it's a great training exercise for administration. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about building teams versus team building today. And when I'm talking about building teams, I'm talking about actually putting together a team of people to work together. And when I'm talking about team building, I'm talking about the process that it takes to help those people that you put together to accomplish their goals. I like this quote. A team really is together everyone achieves more. And a team is really involves the interdependence of employees or group members that work together in cooperation to accomplish work or a common purpose. And in our today's healthcare environment, we all are involved with working with multiple teams, whether it be in the delivery of healthcare or in whether we're involved with a research team. Most of us who do research, that is not usually a one-man job to do research. It usually involves a team of people to do that. And also in teaching today, more and more we're doing a process that involves teaching with teams. My husband had knee surgery a week ago, and I sat and reflected about in our exposure to a healthcare delivery in that experience, how many different teams of people we interacted with in one day, from the surgical team, from the nursing team, from the physical therapy team, from the occupational therapy team, the discharge planning team. We saw more people in 3 days just because of all these teams of people that it took to accomplish this process to have his knee replacement and then to get us home. And now that we're home, we also have a whole team of home health people that are coming to our house today through the next couple weeks to see us too. So healthcare is really made up of teams, and so we have to think about, as we work in teams, how we go about doing that in the best way we can. In building a team, the challenge is really finding a mix of individuals that work together as a group to accomplish work goals. And that starts by either putting together a team or hiring a team. And most of us think about, well, you know, I really work best if I can work with somebody that's like me. Well, in fact, when you put together teams of people, it really works best if you hire a bunch of people that are not like you at all, but that really have varied abilities, strengths, and talents. In other words, when I go to looking at people that I want to put together on a team, I'm actually looking for people that have strengths in the areas that I really don't like to do things so much, or in my areas of weakness. And this is one thing that really goes that is important, I think, in establishing a good team of people that can work together to accomplish goals. A lot of times you have somebody that's very creative in your team. You have another person that might be an implementer, and you have another person that might be a maintainer. And all of those factors are really good as you develop and form teams to work together. Also, varied backgrounds and experiences are important. In this day and age, we need people with different cultural and racial backgrounds. We need people that it's helpful to have older people that have had a lot of experiences on our teams, as well as younger people. And then we also need people with a variety of viewpoints and ideas to come together, to work together to accomplish goals. And that when you get to people with a variety of experiences and a variety of ideas, sometimes that leads to conflicts within teams, but conflicts, when managed properly, can also be a healthy thing that helps a team come up with new and better ideas. So it's important, as you go about gathering people to be part of a team, that you think about the varied strengths and the varied abilities and backgrounds and experiences that they bring to the team as you put that together. It's also important, as you hire people, to think about not just hiring people that are like you. Obviously, you like to have people that have similar attributes and abilities to you, but you also like to have people that have some differences from you as well. After you've hired those people and you start to put together a team of people to work together, it's really important for there to be recognition of the interdependence of individuals' unique contributions that they bring to a team, as well as the shared contributions of the group members as they're working together for a common goal. And so as you try to build a harmonious group that's going to work together to accomplish those goals, it takes really good managerial skills and good interpersonal skills to do that. And it's important, as you develop this team, that as they interact together, that you think about establishing trust, a trusting relationship with those people, that they're able to communicate well, that they have commitment to working in a team, and that you also give people freedom to fail. Freedom to fail is a really important part of helping team members develop and grow. As I've worked with different teams, a lot of times people have difficulty, especially when they have varied capabilities and strengths of working together. And they get upset because someone doesn't do something like they do, or they think that they're not accomplishing the goals in the same way that they think they should. And so there are several tools out there that people can use that really can help you in working with teams to look at different style differences. And these are just some of the ones that I pulled off the internet that are out there. And I've used a lot of these in team building sessions with the groups that I've worked with, because it helps people identify that they're just not doing things to irritate the other team members, that they're really doing those things because that's their styles. And so it's really important for people to identify the different styles and how you can use those different styles to work together more harmoniously. I've got a classic example. When I first came here to work on a research team for Dr. Taunton, we did the Myers-Briggs. The whole team did. Because she would come to a team meeting and she would be so frustrated. She'd come in here with the agenda and she'd have all these things that she wanted to accomplish, and none of us accomplished any of the things that she wanted to. Well, we did the Myers-Briggs, and what we found out is she was the only extrovert in the group, which means she came in expecting to lay a piece of paper in front of the rest of the team. They would read it and they'd make a decision. Well, all of the rest of the group in that team were introverts. And introverts like time to mull. They like time to read things ahead of time. They don't want to make quick decisions. And so you can see that there was a lot of push-pull between what was going on. So after we did the Myers-Briggs, we determined that maybe she should assign someone else to be the person that led the team meetings. They would put together an agenda ahead of time, get all the information out to the team ahead of time, so that they then came into the team meeting prepared to review whatever she wanted reviewed and ready to make a decision. And so that's just an example how you can use one of these tools to help you. So I think when you develop group members to work together in team, it leads to greater exchange of ideas, more creative thinking and innovative ideas, greater productivity, better solutions. I do believe that when you put together a team of people that have offsetting strengths, you come up with a solution that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I also think the team members together feel much more accomplishments. And so from my experiences, I really believe that the strengths lie in the differences that you find among the people in your team, and not necessarily in their similarities, as Stephen Covey wrote. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think today is probably the first time that I've used the word team building in a sentence. It's not something that I think about really explicitly, but I think, like most people, when you get to the point where you have a particular job, there are lots of things that you're asked to do that you don't have any formal training in. So today, what I'm going to tell you about are some of the things I think are important in building teams in a research laboratory, and they are mostly things that I've observed in the labs that I've worked in, as well as my own lab here at KU. And I'd like to offer thanks to all of the good mentors that I've had along the way, from whom I've gotten some of these examples. And okay, so one of the first things I'd like to kind of dispel is the idea that scientists work really in isolation. I think there's a common misperception that scientists are sort of sitting in their little offices thinking great thoughts, or working alone in the laboratory late at night. And here are two examples. I guess, can we turn the lights down? I don't think you can see this all that well. Oops. There we go. Okay. So here are two examples of scientists that are sort of from the popular literature, culture. And as you can see, both male and female scientists kind of suffer from the perceptions that filmmakers at least have of them. On the left-hand side, you see a scientist whose job it is to study aliens, so you might expect that he'd be sort of kept away in a little place 23 floors below the surface of the Earth, which he was. But what you can't see are the very attractive flood length of the pants that he has on. He's wearing hush puppies, so not somebody that, as he is about to say in this film clip here, he's about to say, they don't let us out much, and you can see why. So female scientists don't really have a much better view here. You may not recognize Uma Thurman there in her scientist disguise, but my point in showing you these pictures is just to let you know that this is not the way things are in real life. I mean, these are not meant to portray NIH-funded scientists, hopefully, but instead, there is some perception that you're working by yourself, and really you're not. I mean, your own research lab, you are going to be doing things with groups of people. It's much more common in science these days to do methods and techniques that aren't necessarily housed in your own lab, but that you have to go somewhere else to do. So as the team leader of a research group, what you have to do is make sure that you've got a good environment in your lab, and then also you can kind of train your people so that when they are interacting with other people, they sort of know how to act, as it were. So as has been said many times here, you need to choose your lab members carefully. Now you'll notice there's kind of an avian theme running through my slides here, and that's because the research model that we use in our lab is chickens. And so as you can see here in these multicolored chickens, it's meant to represent that you're going to have people of various styles, as Marge just said, and various ways that they work, and your job as the team leader is to make sure that everybody plays well together. Everybody does their own thing. And the It Only Takes One makes reference to the fact that in every lab that I've been in ever, things wax and wane, whether people work well together or whether they don't. And it can be the case that it just takes one person who doesn't play well with the other children, and it kind of disrupts the whole workings of the laboratory. So I will also emphasize what other people have said is that you want to choose your lab members very carefully. And another kind of aspect of a research lab is that it often has a less formal hierarchy, a less formal pecking order, if you will. Sorry for the fun. We've talked a lot, especially here at the medical center. I mean, I think everybody kind of knows what the hierarchy is, you know, sort of where your place is on the food chain. And it's a pretty hierarchical place. Now, this is a photograph of the laboratory that I worked in as a postdoc. This is from the University of Virginia Medical Center in Charlottesville. And this is a picture of the otolaryngology department, which is where my research lab was housed. And as you can see there, it's a very nice picture. Everybody has their white lab coats on. The attendings are in the front row. Residents are in the back row. The guy there kind of on the far right is my postdoctoral mentor, Ed Rubel, who I guess just didn't get the memo that day of, you know, what he was supposed to be wearing. Ed kept in his office drawer a clip-on tie so that when he had to go over to the department, he could put on the tie and then he'd be ready to go.
The only time I've ever seen him.
I know, that's exactly right. So my point in showing you this is just to say that the hierarchy within a lab is a little less formal than it is in many other medical settings. So for example, in my lab, people call me by my first name or hey you, or you know, kind of whatever works at that point. It's kind of a hard transition sometimes for the medical students and residents who work in the lab to make as they come in the lab. When they come in and ask for Dr. Durham, I'm tempted to look around and see if my dad has suddenly, you know, appeared in the lab behind me. But it's a good thing in that you can often kind of find out what's going on. It keeps you a little closer to the activities going on in the lab, and that's usually a good thing. On the other hand, there are times that you, as the head of the lab, have to know when it's time to become Dr. Durham. When, as my students will say, Diane, we need you to put on your Dr. Durham shoes and go either deal with an issue outside the lab or deal with an issue within the lab. So that's just something that you have to learn to do by trial and error. So one of the other things I think is very important is to listen to what people have to say. This is probably the smartest thing you can learn to do. Now, as John pointed out, we are kind of interested in hearing. And this particular thing was found by somebody in the lab, thought it might be a useful thing. And Bob, I was just thinking it kind of as a faculty development thing, that at the low price of $9 a pair, it'd be something, you know, that you could get and hand out to all the new faculty members, because that's probably the most important thing you can do, is to learn to listen both to what people are telling you, also to be cognizant of what they're not telling you. And that's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to, well, it didn't to me, and I guess to most other people as well. But you really have to kind of pay attention to what's going on and hear what people are telling you and not. Also, I think you need to be very clear about what your expectations are and what you are saying to people. That's another thing that you have to just kind of make sure you are making yourself very clear. And finally, do some fun things as a group. That's something that we certainly don't have any trouble doing in our lab here. And I think that's kind of common for many places, that you have some either activities that you do. In almost every lab that I've ever been in, there's a graffiti wall, as an example is shown on the left-hand side here. We had one wall within my lab here at KU that wouldn't accommodate shelves. And so we're trying to think, well, what can we do for this wall? Well, it became the wall of fun. And so as you found cartoons that, or other things that were interesting that you might want to post, that's where they ended up. And I think all of us were very, especially all the chicken people in the world, were very disappointed when Gary Larson stopped drawing cartoons, because he was a great source for chicken jokes especially. Now on the right-hand side shows an example of what we do as a social event. It's a kind of Friday afternoon get-together for beer, and in honor of our research subjects, we call it Beer and Cheeps. Now, I don't have any pictures from Beer and Chips, because that's one of the first rules of Beer and Cheeps is what happens at Beer and Cheeps stays at Beer and Cheeps, right? So no pictures, just a representative sample of the attendees. So at any rate, this is just some things that I've learned in running a research lab, and hope they're of some use to somebody.
Chair of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine and Associate Dean in the School of Medicine.
Well, I have the dubious distinction or pleasure sometimes of lecturing second-year medical students, and there's supposed to be 175 of them, which this looks like this is about, and there almost never is. So this is a fairly awesome, kind of a awesome audience to be giving this talk to. And also, I was a little bit surprised to be asked to be in this. I've been chair for 2.5 years. I've been the associate dean for, probably 5.5 years, but I feel like the neophyte among the group. What I'd like to start out by talking about is what many people have already talked about, how you get started in building a team. And these were the things that I think about. These are the things that I think about when I'm building the team or maintaining the team, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. And that is that it's the right size, you have the right number of people. Now that's a dynamic component, because that can be a bigger number or a smaller number depending on what your goals are for the year or for 5 years. And diversity, that's a very important thing to me. And when I'm thinking about the diversity of my team, I think about the broad range of diversity, not just racial and ethnic diversity, but also in ability, in skills, geographic location. I'm looking for my executive team to be about my height. And, and if you know anybody in my department, you know that that's about right. And I think actually it's very important that you have adequate financial and administrative support for your team, because without that, I mean, at least with a minimum amount of support, I think it adds too many stresses and distractors in order to be able to do your work. I think it's important once your team is formed, or as you're forming your team, to recognize those talented people and reward and retain them. And with regard to what Dr. Ferraro was talking about, the deadwood or some of the challenges that you may inherit, I have found that kind of ignoring them is detrimental to the group, and so they do need a little bit of time to be managed until they learn that their biggest contribution to the group is going on to another opportunity. And then, as you know, you can build a group, but and I have to bring in the sports metaphors. And actually, when I first started this talk, I had a lot of sports metaphors because, you know, I'm kind of drawn to them. But I just have this one from the Duke, from the coach from Duke, that when you assemble a group, it's not a team right off the bat. It's only a collection of individuals, and it's the nurturing and feeding of that collection of individuals that keeps them, makes them the very best team. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. And the strategy I want to talk about that I kind of practice is similar to what is known as the executive walk rounds. I don't know if you guys have seen Irene Cummings walk through the hospital, but she does this. The executive walk round is an IHI tool for improvement of health. And for those of you who don't know what IHI is, that's the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, which is a nonprofit organization driving the improvement of health by advancing quality and the value of health care. When health executives walk through a hospital, it provides them with firsthand knowledge from the patient and the patient's family point of view, but also it allows them the opportunity to interact with the staff, and it has been found to build will and incentive for process improvement. It also generates data and ideas. Well, I'm not going to try to pretend that I read all of this stuff, and so I started doing this. I actually started walking around because we're just geographically separated all over the place here. And so I learned about the walk around separately and then named my strategy fancily so that I could look smart. But I do this because, like I said, one of the challenges at University of Kansas is that we're geographically separated. And I have found that it's important for me to go around and touch bases with different people who are located in geographically separate parts of the campus and who are doing very different kinds of work to provide me with what I call vital signs or critical information about the team's state of health. I find that by going around, I can help identify new or acute problems, just like you would with vital signs. I can quantify the magnitude of any problems that might exist and the kind of stress that it's bringing on the team. And it's important to see and hear them sometimes, more important than your requisite departmental meeting. I don't think that kind of information is readily available in that context. And it also helps you monitor those chronic problems that you have that might need some managing and inspiration to find other opportunities. And so what are these vital signs? I call this, I had to come up with little cute things to call them. Temperature, which is the degree of hotness or coldness, is also, I think, equivalent to morale, or the state of the spirits of a person or of a group as exhibited by their confidence, their cheerfulness and willingness to complete tasks. The pulse, which is the rhythmic throbbing of an organism, is what I equate to productivity. So if you go and see them and talk to them and see them working on the bench, you can see how productive people are being. And respiration, or that exchange of information, obviously when you go visit someone at their site of work, that is a very important, I think, and ideal opportunity in order to get that feedback from them that they might not feel free to give you in a departmental meeting with everybody there. And so these are the important outcomes, I think, of doing this walk around. I think it gives people, your staff, your faculty, a sense of being noticed and needed and respected, the fact that you took the time out of your day to come see them. I think it provides that sense of connectedness, that thread that keeps us sewn together. It's an opportunity to provide new ideas. I think it allows consensus building. I can go from one person to another and share the information and build this information and consensus as I go, and then by the time we come back to the next departmental meeting, we can have consensus around an issue, and it also eliminates the amount of kind of inefficient discussion about some issues. It allows me to identify problems early. I've often learned about whether staff attrition or somebody about to leave through these walk-rounds, and I didn't formally learn about it for 6 months later. But in the meantime, because I already knew about it 6 months prior, I was already working on replacement. So I think that it's been important in that way. It also provides an access, I think, to the leader of the team, and a kind of an access that has higher quality than being in a group of people. And so I find it important in that way as well. And finally, I think I'm done here. I think this is an important concept I learned as a new parent from a parenting magazine. You can catch people being good or doing good. And I think that's the most important concept you can come away with, and it allows people to have new self-esteem. Thank you. I finish in 5 minutes. Perfect.
Dr. Jim Dugan and Dr. Larry Long were instrumental in meeting with all of our speakers and helping put the program together. Dr. Dugan has volunteered to be moderator of the group, and I'm going to run around with the microphone and see if anybody has any questions.
Good. It's, again, very nice presentations, very interesting. Can everybody hear me okay? One of the things that strikes me a theme is that how humor and kind of listening and the nurturing and kind of is the connecting tissue that sort of builds, Patricia was talking about that, how it builds the teams. And so without saying much more, part of our discussion last time was hearing from you guys what your reactions, what comments, thoughts you had to the group or to specific members in the group. So reactions, thoughts. Bob, we're going to just, okay.
I was curious about tying this into what we had at the last leadership meeting about the idea that sometimes we switch our roles from leaders to, what were the other two? Leaders, followers, and managers, okay? And what I was trying to think of is as you build your teams, and particularly maybe with the research lab, is it Dr. Durham or Diane today? It's Dr. Durham today, I think it is. Okay, okay. But particularly like within your experience in the research lab, are you always the leader on your team, or how do you switch those roles back and forth so other people on the team assume leadership roles, etc.?
Yeah, I am certainly not always the leader, that's for sure. And I mean, if you've ever seen me, perfusing a chicken, you know that I'm not the leader of the team. So you don't do it consciously, I don't think necessarily, but I think it's really important to let people take charge of certain parts of the lab, and that to me would be kind of turning over the leadership role to other people to do things. I think also in a research lab you want to be able to foster people's independence, and what I, for example, expect in my graduate students is at the beginning they're asking me questions every 5 minutes and what can I do about this. By the end I expect them to be telling me here's how we're going to be doing this, and if you don't like it I'm in charge of it, so there you go. So you expect a certain evolution, I think, in the way especially students will work in the lab.
And this, I meant to say, another personal way to be involved, I think, as a leader, I meant to say a variation of the walk rounds is to continue to do that work which you did to get you to be the leader in the first place. So you become a staff member. I continue, for example, to do my surgical pathology. And in that role, I am a faculty member, and I have a director who's above me who I answer to. And so in that way, I think I do some of what you're talking about.
How do you handle the reality that once you've built this team, many times it's comprised of members at different levels, and you have to reward those team members differently. So for example, in a research lab, you have people that get more money, more outside recognition, more travel, more perks, but they're not necessarily, you don't want to promote the fact that they're more valuable than the other team members. Like your lowest level technician might be a wonderful contribution to the team. So how do you make everyone feel valued when you can't reward them all the same way?
I can take a stab at that, and from my perspective is you develop a sense of trust and honesty with your team members, and you treat them fairly, and they recognize that everybody's being treated fairly. Showing favoritism is not a good thing. Once you become a team leader, quote unquote, you've elevated yourself, or at least removed yourself from the team to a certain degree. Social interactions are affected. You don't hang out with these folks. You don't go to movies, one or two, etc. People get real concerned about that. But if you establish a reputation for being fair, oftentimes when those things come, and honest, and when the opportunities come to reward those other folks, you take advantage of those as well. I think the team generally accepts that, at least in my experience.
I don't think you can underscore listening to the team member about those differences either. And that's a powerful driver that I think each one of these presenters sort of hinted at or talked very directly. So. They're doing it here. You can holler at it.
One of the questions I have about the executive walk-arounds is if Irene Cummings is not coming through your department, what does that tell you? Yeah.
Well, probably some of my staff are saying that.
Well, that's the thing. It's a message that's given when you do walk around, but if you don't, unbeknownst to you maybe, there's a message being sent, and how do you handle that so that people don't feel like you're shortchanging them, or maybe they're not as important, or because the twittering will start,
That's a very good question. Executive walk-arounds are difficult in cute shoes, and it's not possible to get to every place. But I think a variation on that is what I try to do for places where I can't get to is I try to email, frequently information. I try to answer email within 24 hours, and then I would invite you to invite Irene to your area. I would.
She may be totally unaware. Totally unaware that that's the
right. You may be doing such an excellent job that she has never thought that she needed to. Absolutely, isn't that right?
Just add a quick thing. One of the very first things I learned in administration is that you and I could be both looking at this bottle of water and walk away with two very different conceptions of what it is, or perceptions. You may say something and somebody said, well, you said this, and you think, but that's not really what I meant, sort of thing. And that is, I would argue that you need to let her know that we're feeling a little slighted because you're not walking around.
Yes, I had a question about the reality of teams becoming smaller because of resources declining, and if you had any thoughts or comments on how to keep this good thing going with a smaller number of people.
Well, I think you have to recognize the contributions of as people leave your team, you have to recognize the contributions of those people that are leaving your team. And then you also have to be attentive to what kind of situation that creates for the remaining people that are left. And so you have kind of a double duty there to take care of the people that are leaving, but also remember that the people that are staying are also feeling some uneasiness because of as teams are downsized or smaller. So I think you have to pay attention to both of those things and attend to those.
Let me ask you, what do you guys do when teams are reduced in size?
Well, we have big celebrations and appreciation parties for the people that are leaving.
Good.
And we talk
That's great.
a lot. We talk a lot in advance because we usually have notice that the grants are getting smaller. So we try to do that. And for the last several years, I've been giving efficiency awards so that we reward the accomplishments of everyone, but also doing things in a more efficient manner, which people are really clever at being able to figure that out, and they get a big applause and things like that.
There are certain things you can do things about and certain things you can't to a certain degree. And I've likened being a team leader, it's almost like, to a certain degree, having children. When you have children, you give up psychic peace forever. There's never a time when if you let yourself...
What does that say about teams?
Well, it's true with administration, too. That's my point. Is there's never a time when if you let yourself, you can't be worried about something. And there are many times I've lost sleep over an issue, and a few days later I'm really upset I lost sleep over that issue, sort of thing. And they can, work away, but there are certain times, Carol, where you just got to basically make do with what you can.
Somebody else have a question?
But from this side of the room, there you go.
Larry?
As a team leader, of course, if a team member is under-functioning or underperforming, it throws a group off. And clearly you would address that as a team leader. However, how do you build a culture or build your team so that they hold each other accountable, or that you would stoke that in some way? What are some things that you all do to try to encourage or invite that?
Okay, I like what Diane does, those Friday night things, because you get to know people. And if somebody's below the curve, isn't that an opportunity to sort of get in there and talk with them? And I don't know, Diane.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, and I think, to me, the main thing that you need to do is to make sure that people can come to you and tell you when stuff is not working right. I mean, you can be sensitive to things going on. You're kind of looking around, and you notice that two people aren't talking to each other that normally do, you know, things like that. So you have to be kind of teach yourself to look for that sort of stuff. I have always had somebody in the lab, typically, who will kind of let me know when things are happening, just as an FYI, and that's, you know, you don't want to think that they're a rat, you know, they're ratting out their bugs. But on the other hand, it's been very valuable to me to have somebody who's willing to come up to me and say, you know, you may have noticed this, and that's because so and so is having a problem, and here's the deal. So that's kind of how I've worked with that.
The other comment I would like to say is I think that you have a role to develop people, and one of those roles is when people come to you, members of your team, that somebody's underperforming, then your role is to help them maybe approach that person and to help maybe walk through that situation with them so that they become more comfortable dealing with each other in those issues. And so I think as the team leader, we shouldn't forget that just because someone comes to us with a problem doesn't mean that we have to manage the problem. Sometimes it's more beneficial for us to teach them how to manage their own problems between them. And that also brings up the area, I think, when we have teams, there's going to be conflict. And people get very uncomfortable with conflict. And so learning how to manage conflict within a team is really important. And conflict isn't always bad. Conflict can, if you can get people to address disagreements about that they're actually disagreeing with the other person's thought and they're not personally attacking the other person, those are also helpful things to get people to learn to communicate with each other, trust each other, and and you can set the tone that conflict actually can be very productive and okay.
I think that's excellent. But one other thing, when it's possible, we use data. And people on this campus tend to respond to data in a rather, they don't get emotional about it. And I think we try in our department to be very transparent with data. And if somebody can look at this data, very hard facts, and everybody's looking, and we have transparency, so everybody sees the same data, and they can see that they themselves are not functioning, then, you know, they get with the program or find a different one.
You know, sometimes there's a fine line between being receptive when there are problems and actually making it your mission to go hunt for problems. And I guarantee you, in any team, if you really search hard enough, you will find problems. And I think as the team leader, that's not your job, per se. You don't necessarily turn away when you think there's a problem brewing, but you don't necessarily go looking for trouble when there may not be anything there. And sometimes that's a fine line. The other thing you don't want to do is use the other team members in a divisive sort of way and going to them and saying, so tell me, Joe really isn't performing very well, is he? And put them in the awkward position of snitching, or as Diane was saying. I think you make it clear to them as a group, if there are problems, I need to know about them and I'm receptive to do it. And then very importantly, when the problems do arise, you are receptive to helping solve those.
I think it's one of the hardest things to do as a team leader. The tendency is to wait, hoping it'll get better. And but other questions, if be our devil's advocate, what could our group here have done? What did we miss? What could have helped tweak us a little bit? What are some of the things that you want to add before we finish here today? I'll tell you, one of the things I like about KU is there's so many smart people here, so many bright people, I think, a lot of, a good IQ power. What's going to make the difference is really what we're talking about today. How we contribute, how we work together as a team, certainly in patient care, that was Marge's point. Creativity, that's Diane's point. Research innovations are going to come through a collaborative team effort. So we're smart, but the real challenge is, I think, are getting our teams to, it's damn hard work. There's no easy book on it, I think is what our group is saying. So what did we miss? What are the things that we left out? Comments? What did we?
I think we've covered it all.
I like a team like that. We got it all done. Yes.
I just, as I listen to you all, and I know this is hosted the School of Medicine. I'm from the hospital. I'm a nurse manager, and my thought was, reaching out into my setting particularly. In the hospital, we've had significant amount of growth, and so rather than downsizing, our problems have been much more upsizing and how to deal with that. And so I think from my perspective, I'd like to hear a little bit more about dealing with that type of an issue, and maybe collaboratively working with some of the hospital folks in that area.
So give us your question one more time. How do you deal with growth in the hospital?
I don't think I was asking a question as much as a statement. You had asked about directions or maybe some thoughts, and
sure.
That's what I was going.
Oh, okay. Other reflections, thoughts before we finish? Final comments? We got it all, right?
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.